For the Christian armies of the First Crusade, taking the city of Jerusalem in 1099 was the easy part. For their next trick, they'd rebuild most of the city from scratch and then hope to God they could actually hold the place. With the assembled crusading armies mostly heading back west, the new king of Jerusalem relied on monastic military orders like the Hospitaller and Templar Knights to defend the Holy Land and protect the traveling Christians who brought the four Crusader states so much money. Sugarcane and silk were all well and good, but the pilgrimage business was a machine, as visitors flocked to sites like the newly rebuilt Church of the Holy Sepulchre, reconstructed by the Crusaders in gorgeous Romanesque style around Jesus' burial tomb and the hill of Golgotha where he was crucified. Of course, the Holy Land was sacred to Jews and Muslims as well as Christians, and the Crusader settlers were scant in comparison to the existing population, with the exception of Jerusalem itself, where all could visit but only Christians could live. No dice for the thousands of Jews and Muslims who got displaced. This was strategically unideal, as interfaith cooperation, while possible, was uneasy, and the states of what's known as Outremer were heavily reliant on distant European manpower and money. By contrast, the threat of Muslim reconquest was never far away. While the Franks could congratulate themselves for a job well crusaded, holding a thin strip of land thousands of kilometers from European backup wasn't a viable long-term strategy. So after Jerusalem was captured by Sultan Saladin in 1187, the capital of a vastly diminished kingdom shifted to the fortified port city of Acre. For the past century, it had served as the Franks' main entry point and became the biggest trading hub in the eastern Mediterranean, so when the Third Crusade was called to retake the kingdom from Saladin, Acre was the ideal choice for where to hold the fort. And Acre absolutely was a fortress, with gigantic tower-guarded walls and an enclosed harbor defending an impressively robust medley of militaries, including all three monastic knightly orders and the combined navies of Venice, Genoa, and Pisa. And this kind of city was familiar to those Italian merchant republics, as Acre functioned like another island outpost in their overseas empires rather than the capital of a full Crusader state, and it soon began to feel like there really wasn't much of a kingdom left outside of Acre and a few other cities, as 6 subsequent crusades over the 1200s failed to secure their holdings, culminating in the Mamluk capture of Acre in 1291, whereupon the Crusaders were kicked out of the Holy Land for good. With Levantine terra firma now quite firmly closed, the Crusaders pulled back a step and resettled on the island of Cyprus. It had been Byzantine on and off for centuries, but around the Third Crusade it quickly changed hands several times, ending up as the Crusader Kingdom of Cyprus in 1192. And once it no longer had to bother ferrying hopeless knights over to the front, Cyprus in the 1300s was free to become the mercantile hub for trade with the Muslim world and the producer of enough sugar to sweeten all of Europe. With cash flow like that, the capital of Nicosia and the main port of Famagusta could go absolutely wild on grand cathedrals in the new Gothic style, inspired by the trends back in France but unique in their simplicity and clarity. And Cyprus was the rare place where you could see an Orthodox Gothic church, as the island was home to a majority Greek population with Catholic French and Italians focused in the cities. And of course, those Italians knew a useful island when they saw one, so Genoa and Venice competed for influence over the French Lusignan dynasty throughout the 1400s. This familiar struggle left the Kingdom of Cyprus weak enough for Venice to simply snap it up in 1489, enjoying one of the most prosperous islands in the Mediterranean for one last century of Latin rule. As the centuries dragged on and the Holy Land was lost, some Crusaders were happy to settle for plain old land. After taking some notes on maritime statecraft from the Italians, the Hospitaller Knights took the island of Rhodes as their base in 1310 and pestered the Ottoman Empire enough to get chased out in 1520, soon to settle into their new home on the island of Malta. Just like old times, step 1 was not dying, as the Ottomans furiously besieged the island in 1565 but surprisingly failed to defeat those sturdy knights. And true to their crusading roots, the swashbuckling Knights of Malta continued badgering Ottoman ships and tussling with their pirates. After so confidently placing their little island right in the thick of Mediterranean conflict, the knights sought to avoid a repeat of the Great Siege, so they set about fortifying their shiny new capital city of La Valletta, building coastal watchtowers, an aqueduct to bring in fresh water, and, of course, buttloads of churches. Starting with a cathedral to the knights' patron St. John, a combination of big privateering revenue and close contact with southern Europe kicked off a golden age of Maltese Baroque art and architecture. And so Malta remained Christendom's unsinkable citadel of limestone. Just as soon as the Crusaders stepped into Jerusalem in 1099, they were already on the back foot, struggling not only to hold all these distant kingdoms, but also figuring out what on earth to do with them. But as much as I myself have taken potshots at the abundant pointlessness of the whole endeavor, each of these cities were at one point on that fascinating threshold between the Abrahamic faiths, first in the Holy Land, and later, as they got pushed back, on the islands. Always building on old foundations, but still creating something unique and new. Over time, the Crusader states understood their purpose very differently, and I think slowly came to realize that Holy Land was a flexible concept. Thank you so much for watching. I don't want to get back on my old crusade tirade, but I do feel it necessary to acknowledge the tens of thousands of Jewish and Muslim and Orthodox civilians who were killed or forcibly displaced in the wake of the Crusades. That doesn't really fit into my cute little narrative about cities and architecture, but oh boy did it happen. It's easy to get crusading tunnel vision and focus on grand strategy, but in this case, it's important to remember that this was happening right outside the proverbial frame of action. Alright, I'll see you next time.